"May I sit here?" the woman asked, unaware that the single father looking up from his black coffee was the anonymous stranger she had spent 12 years trying to find. Harbor Bean Cafe was crowded that rainy October morning. Office workers filled the tables, students waited near the counter, and wet umbrellas leaned against almost every chair. Only one seat remained open. It stood across from Daniel Carter at a small table beside the front window. Daniel moved his notebook and canvas work bag before the woman had to ask twice. "Of course," he said. "A chair should not stay empty when someone needs it." She thanked him and sat down with a cappuccino, a cream-colored coat folded over one arm. Without the tailored suits, television lights, and security team that usually surrounded her, few people recognized Victoria Hayes. At 38, she was the founder of Hayes Capital and one of the most successful technology investors in the country. That morning, however, she wanted to spend one quiet hour as an ordinary person. Daniel gave her exactly that gift. His work boots were marked with paint, and the cuff of his denim jacket had been repaired with dark thread. An open notebook rested beside his coffee. It contained a household budget written in careful blue ink, groceries, electricity, Emma's school lunch account, replacement part for the truck, and $35 labeled Tomorrow Fund. At the bottom of the page, Daniel had written a reminder to himself: leave enough to help someone else. When he noticed Victoria glance toward the notebook, he closed it without embarrassment. The numbers were private, but they were not shameful. "Long week?" Victoria asked. Daniel smiled. "It is only Tuesday, so I'm trying not to answer too quickly." She laughed. The ease of it surprised her. Most people who met Victoria either tried to impress her or wanted something from her. Daniel appeared interested only in sharing the table fairly. "The budget looks serious," she said. "My daughter is 10, he explained. She believes every science project deserves the funding of a space program. I am the finance department. Does the finance department ever say no?" "Often." Then, the research department presents another drawing with colored arrows, and negotiations begin again. Victoria smiled into her coffee. "What is her latest project?" "A water filter made from gravel, sand, charcoal, and several containers I was apparently saving for no reason. Her name is Emma. She wants to design clean water systems when she grows up. Last month, she wanted to study volcanoes, so the future remains flexible." Daniel worked in maintenance for the Portland Public School District. He repaired leaking pipes, broken lights, damaged cabinets, and heating systems that always seemed to fail on the coldest morning of the year. He described the job without apology and without pretending it was more glamorous than it was. "If I do it well," he said, "children never need to know I was there. The classroom simply works." Victoria studied him over the rim of her cup. "That sounds like an important kind of work." "Most useful work is important to someone." He asked what she did. Victoria had learned that revealing her name could change a conversation in seconds. People began calculating opportunities before she finished speaking. She chose an answer that was true but incomplete. "I help small companies grow." "Do you enjoy it?" No one had asked her that in years. They asked whether a deal had succeeded, whether a fund had reached its target, or what market she planned to enter next. Enjoyment seemed almost irresponsible beside those questions. "Sometimes," she answered, "I enjoy helping people build something they could not build alone. I do not always enjoy what success asks them to sacrifice." Daniel nodded, as though the answer made sense. "Then it is probably good that someone in the room notices the difference." Their conversation moved from work to books, rain, and the best places in Portland to watch autumn leaves. Daniel listened without searching for an opening to speak about himself. When the barista delivered Victoria's breakfast, he thanked her by name after reading her tag. The young woman looked surprised, then pleased. Daniel noticed the reaction. "People like to know they have not become part of the furniture," he said. "Do you always remember names?" "No. I make the effort because I know how it feels when someone remembers mine." Victoria looked toward the window. 12 years earlier, during the most uncertain period of her life, letters had begun arriving at a small scholarship program she was struggling to keep open. They contained modest cashier's checks, usually between $25 and $75, and no name. The money had never saved the entire program. It had purchased a student's textbooks, covered an application fee, or filled the final gap in a bus ticket home. Yet the letters often arrived on days when Victoria was close to believing that no one else cared. Each one contained the same handwritten sentence. Someone believed in tomorrow. Please help them reach it. She had preserved every letter. Long after Hayes Capital became successful and the scholarship program grew into a national foundation, the anonymous envelopes continued arriving. Victoria had published thank you notices, asked the foundation staff to watch for a return address, and left messages in annual reports. The donor never stepped forward. Daniel's notation, "Tomorrow Fund," drew her attention, but the phrase was common enough to mean nothing. She did not mention it. Instead, she asked whether he volunteered anywhere. "Emma and I help at the community repair clinic once a month," he said. "People bring lamps, small appliances, and bicycles they cannot afford to replace. She sorts screws and asks everyone questions. That sounds useful. It is also safer than allowing her to redesign our plumbing." Victoria laughed again. When Daniel checked the clock, nearly an hour had passed. "I need to collect supplies before the kindergarten sinks become an indoor river," he said, placing his notebook in a canvas bag. "Thank you for sharing the table. Thank you for making room." As he stood, he removed a pen and wrote the address of the repair clinic on a paper napkin. If your small businesses ever replace office lamps or tools, the clinic accepts donations. Victoria took the napkin. The blue handwriting was neat and slightly slanted. Something about it stirred a memory, but she could not identify why. By the next afternoon, those same letters would appear on an envelope no one had been able to trace for 12 years. Daniel pulled up his jacket and stepped into the rain. Victoria remained beside the window, holding a simple address written in blue ink. She had no reason to believe the man was connected to the old letters. Still, for the first time in years, she felt the faint movement of a question she thought she had stopped asking. The next day, Victoria sent 23 office lamps to the repair clinic without using the donation as an excuse to search for Daniel. Retired tradespeople worked beside teenagers while visitors waited for lamps, bicycles, and small appliances. No one had to prove poverty. People paid, volunteered, or simply accepted help. The clinic gave Daniel's idea practical meaning. Repair protected the value already inside an object. Victoria carried that thought into an urgent Hayes Capital meeting, where partners wanted to remove the founder of a struggling software company. She found both concealed financial problems and unusual trust within the engineering team. The board imposed 90 days of independent oversight instead of choosing immediate removal. The decision was not softer. It was more precise. From that day forward, Victoria added one question to every restructuring. What knowledge, trust, or community disappears if we choose the simplest number? The conversation at Harbor Bean had made a habit visible. What she did next would determine whether anything truly changed. The next morning began with one of Daniel's dinosaur pancakes leaning dangerously toward the shape of an island. Stegosaurus, Emma decided. I planned a Tyrannosaurus. The tail is too friendly. Their home still carried Emily's presence 4 years after her death. Photographs in the hallway and her yellow mug holding spoons beside the stove. The $35 marked Tomorrow Fund also belonged to her. 12 years earlier, Daniel and Emily had attended a neighborhood meeting where a 26-year-old Victoria presented a fragile scholarship program run from a borrowed office. Emily wanted to help. They began sending anonymous checks. $20, sometimes $50, and $5 when money tightened. The purpose was not to rescue the entire foundation. It was to tell the person opening the mail that the work mattered beyond that room. When Emily later became ill, strangers helped their family. A church paid one utility bill. A nurse found Emma a winter coat, and a retired teacher left groceries containing foods Emma already liked. Emily saw the difference between aid that processed a family and aid that recognized one. Kindness should travel, she told Daniel. But our child's needs come first. After Emily died, donations stopped for 5 months. Funeral bills and reduced hours consumed everything. 6-year-old Emma found the empty jar and placed a drawing inside it. a yellow sun above three figures holding hands. Can tomorrow use a picture until we have dollars? Daniel mailed the drawing without a check. The foundation copied its uneven sun onto the office bulletin board, where Victoria saw it for years without knowing its source. When Daniel's household stabilized, the small checks resumed. The promise never required pretending they had no needs. Rent, food, medicine, school lunches, and emergency savings came first. A failed truck battery once paused contributions for 2 months. Daniel took Emma to volunteer at the repair clinic instead. Helping is the promise, he told her. Money is only one way to keep it. Emma still added coins when she could. She knew the jar supported somebody's next step, but not which foundation received it. After dropping Emma at school, Daniel spent the morning repairing a heating vent and replacing a broken cabinet door. During lunch, he walked to the credit union and purchased a $35 cashier's check. He placed it inside a cream-colored envelope addressed to the Hayes Tomorrow Foundation. Beneath the check, he wrote the familiar sentence in blue ink. Someone believed in tomorrow. Please help them reach it. He mailed it without hesitation. Across the city, the matching handwriting was already waiting on Victoria's desk. Across the city, Victoria placed Daniel's napkin inside her desk drawer and tried to forget it. She had 3 investment meetings, 2 interviews, and a board dinner requiring her attention. Yet that evening, when her office finally became quiet, she opened a small wooden box stored in a locked cabinet. Cream-colored envelopes lay inside, tied with a faded blue ribbon. Victoria unfolded the oldest letter. The writing was neat and slightly slanted. She placed Daniel's napkin beside it. Several letters formed the same way. The capital T leaned forward. The final stroke of the letter G curved beneath the line. Similarity was not proof. Handwriting changed over 12 years, and people often learned the same styles in school. She reminded herself that Daniel deserved privacy more than she deserved an answer. The next afternoon, Margaret Shaw, the foundation director, entered Victoria's office carrying the week's mail. She had worked beside Victoria since the scholarship program occupied one borrowed room. Another one came, Margaret said, setting a cream envelope on the desk. Victoria looked at the postmark. The envelope had entered the mail the previous afternoon. She opened it carefully. A check for $35 rested inside, along with a familiar sentence. The fresh handwriting matched the address Daniel had written less than 2 days earlier. Margaret noticed the napkin. Do you know who sent it? I may have met him. After all these years, I do not know yet. Victoria retied the letters. And I will not investigate his bank records, follow him, or turn his life into a mystery for us to solve. If it is him, he chose privacy for a reason. I can ask him honestly, or I can leave him alone. Margaret nodded. What will you do? Victoria looked at the $35 check. First, I need to understand whether asking would be for his benefit or mine. She discussed the question with the foundation's ethics advisor without sharing Daniel's identity. The advisor asked what harm the conversation might cause. Daniel could feel watched, embarrassed, or pressured by Victoria's wealth. He might fear that refusing contact would affect the foundation. He might also value learning that the letters had reached real people. You cannot remove every risk, the advisor said. You can reduce the power imbalance. Meet him in the same public place. Ask once. Tell him how you recognize the writing. Make it clear that silence or refusal will end the question. Do not arrive with money, publicity, or a decision already made about his life. Victoria wrote the advice in her notebook. In business, preparation usually meant building leverage. This preparation required her to surrender it. She also reviewed the foundation's handling of anonymous gifts. Staff members had tried to trace the donor years earlier by examining public postal information and internal records, but no one had accessed private bank data. Victoria ordered the search formally closed. Even if Daniel denied sending the letters, the foundation would not pursue another lead. That evening, she read several messages from scholarship recipients. One nurse wrote that the book stipend allowed her to complete a required course without delaying graduation. A teacher described using his first paycheck to help his younger sister apply to college. An engineer had begun contributing $10 each month after receiving her first promotion. The original gifts had already traveled forward through people who never knew Daniel existed. Victoria realized she did not need his name to validate the outcome. She wanted to thank him because gratitude felt unfinished. If she approached him, she would have to accept that her need for closure did not create an obligation for him to receive it. 3 days later, one honest question could either complete the story or end their new friendship. 3 days later, Victoria returned to Harbor Bean Cafe. She told herself there was no guarantee Daniel would be there, but she arrived at the same hour and found him beside the window. He had saved the spare chair without placing anything on it. "I thought your small businesses might keep you away," he said. "They tried." Daniel closed the book he was reading. "Did the repair clinic address help?" "It did. My office has 23 lamps scheduled for replacement. The clinic can have all of them if they are useful. They will find homes." "Thank you." Victoria sat down. She had planned several careful questions, but Daniel asked about her week, and the conversation returned to its easy rhythm. Emma's water filter had worked, although the kitchen counter had not survived the experiment cleanly. Daniel had repaired the kindergarten sinks. Victoria had persuaded a promising founder not to surrender control of her company in exchange for a rushed investment. "You protected her future," Daniel said. The words made Victoria think of the letters. She placed both hands around her coffee. "Daniel, there is something I did not tell you." He waited. "My name is Victoria Hayes. I founded Hayes Capital, but I also started the Hayes Tomorrow Foundation." Daniel's expression changed only for a moment. His eyes moved toward his canvas bag, then back to her. "I know the foundation," he said. "I believe you do." Victoria removed one letter from her handbag and placed it on the table. She had brought only a copy, unwilling to risk the original in the rain. Daniel looked at the sentence, but did not touch the page. "The first of these arrived 12 years ago," she said. "They help students, but they also help me. On difficult days, they reminded me that the work mattered to someone I had never met." A new letter arrived this week. The handwriting matched the address you wrote for me. "I am not here to expose you. I only want to ask once. Did you send them?" Daniel lowered his gaze. For several seconds, the cafe continued around them. Milk steaming, cups touching saucers, the doorbell sounding as customers entered. At last, he nodded. "Emily and I sent the first ones together. I continued after she died." Victoria had imagined this moment for years. In some versions, she delivered a speech. In others, she presented a check large enough to change the donor's life. Facing Daniel, every prepared response felt like an attempt to make the moment belong to her. "Why did you hide your names?" she asked. "We did not want the gift to become a relationship the foundation had to manage. You were supposed to help students, not spend time thanking us." "I did spend time searching." Daniel gave a small, apologetic smile. "Emily would say that proved we should have disguised the handwriting." Victoria laughed through the tears, gathering in her eyes. Those checks were not large, but they often paid for the exact thing a student was missing. One purchased textbooks for our first nursing scholar. Another paid an application fee for a young man who later became a teacher. Your letters also kept me from closing the program during its first year." Daniel looked surprised. "We assumed the messages went into a file somewhere." "They did. I opened that file whenever I wanted to quit." Victoria told him the truth about the foundation's growth. More than 1,800 students had received support. She did not claim Daniel had funded them all or created her success. His small gifts had been one thread among many, but it was a thread that had never broken. "I want to repay you," she said. Daniel shook his head before she finished. "Then it becomes a loan, and it was never a loan. Your truck needs repairs. Emma wants opportunities that cost money. You have spent years helping people you did not know. Please let someone help you." His face remained kind, but his answer was firm. "Emma has what she needs. If you give us special treatment because of the letters, she will learn the wrong lesson from them." Victoria heard pride in his voice, but not the pride of a man who needed to prove he could survive alone. Daniel was protecting the purpose of the gift and his daughter's sense of fairness. "Then tell me what the right lesson is," she said. "That kindness should keep moving." Daniel stood because his lunch break was ending. Before leaving, he looked at the copied letter once more. "I'm glad the messages helped," he said. "But please do not put my name in a report or bring cameras to my house. Emily and I never wanted to become the story. I promise." Victoria watched him walk into the rain. Finding the donor had been easier than deciding how to honor him. Before she reached her office, someone else had already recognized the publicity value of the secret he had asked her to protect. That evening, Daniel told Emma that Victoria worked with the foundation receiving their Tomorrow Fund. He did not reveal every detail, but children often understood more than adults expected. Was she happy? Emma asked. Yes. She wanted to give the money back. Emma frowned. That would make it travel backward. Daniel smiled. You sound like your mother. Mom was usually right. At Hayes Capital, Victoria faced a different conversation. Her communications director learned that the anonymous donor had been found and proposed a national campaign built around Daniel's story. The idea was commercially strong. A modest maintenance worker quietly supporting a future billionaire. It could attract donations, improve the company's reputation, and generate weeks of positive coverage. Victoria refused. He is not a marketing asset, she said. His privacy is part of the gift. We do not get to take it because the story would perform well. The director argued that public attention could help thousands of students. Victoria understood the reasoning. She also understood how easily a powerful institution could turn one ordinary person's generosity into content he no longer controlled. We can tell people why small gifts matter without telling them who he is, she said. The foundation will build a campaign around the action, not the donor. The disagreement moved to the foundation board. Several directors supported Daniel's privacy, but warned that the proposed workshop fund required a major increase in public donations. A personal story could raise that money quickly. Without it, Hayes Capital might have to carry most of the cost, making the program dependent on Victoria's company. One director proposed disguising Daniel's name while using enough details to make the story compelling. Victoria rejected the compromise. A changed name would not protect a school employee whose daughter, city, occupation, and history were recognizable. Then what replaces the story? The director asked. Evidence, Victoria answered. Show donors exactly what small amounts repair. Let teachers and students describe the work with consent. Make the program valuable before we make it famous. The board approved a 60-day launch budget, not the full year Victoria requested. The fund had to attract at least 500 recurring donors and complete 3 pilot projects before the next vote. If it failed, expansion would stop. Victoria did not tell Daniel the board had doubted a campaign without him. She told him the full financial condition. He asked whether the targets were realistic. Difficult, but possible. Then the first projects need to be useful enough that schools tell the story for us. They selected 3 different needs: a library repair club, a greenhouse irrigation system, and a middle school weather station. Each project published a materials budget and progress report. Donors could see a $10 contribution become wire, a seal, or a replacement sensor rather than disappear into a general total. The first month attracted only 211 recurring donors. The board deadline approached. Instead of increasing advertising, Daniel suggested inviting former scholarship recipients to contribute one practical action. Some gave money. A teacher offered 2 Saturday workshops. An engineer donated design review. A nurse funded protective equipment. On the 58th day, the 500th recurring donor enrolled. The board released the annual budget, but Victoria knew the narrow victory had exposed a larger truth. Protecting Daniel's privacy would require the program to earn attention through results every year, not only once. Margaret helped her review 12 years of letters. Together, they noticed themes beyond scholarships. Several notes mentioned broken classroom equipment, teachers paying for supplies, and children whose interests disappeared because their schools lacked working tools. Daniel had spent his career keeping classrooms functional. Emily had worked as an assistant at an elementary school before becoming ill. Their anonymous support connected education with the practical dignity of things that worked. Victoria developed a proposal called the Tomorrow Workshop Fund. It would provide small grants for public school science labs, repair clubs, library equipment, and student engineering projects. Schools would apply through an independent review process. Hayes Capital would match every public donation, including contributions as small as $1. No grant would be reserved for Daniel's district, and Emma would receive no special advantage. Before announcing anything, Victoria asked Daniel and Emma to meet her at the community repair clinic. The clinic occupied the basement of an old church. Volunteers worked at long tables covered with tools, bicycle chains, wires, and half-repaired lamps. Emma wore safety glasses much too large for her face while helping an elderly man test a radio. Victoria showed Daniel the proposal. It does not carry your name or Emily's. The selection process is independent. I'm not giving anything directly to you. I am asking whether this allows the kindness to move forward. Daniel read every page. He asked how schools would be chosen, whether repair was valued over buying new equipment, and whether students could participate safely. Victoria answered each question. Emily would have liked the repair clubs, he said. She hated throwing away anything that could still serve someone. Then will you advise the program? You understand what schools actually need. It would be paid work with the same rate we use for every technical advisor. Daniel hesitated. I will help design the safety standards. I will not choose the grants, and I will not appear in advertisements. Agreed. Emma leaned over the proposal. Can students suggest inventions? They can, Victoria said. Then it needs a page where adults are not allowed to say an idea is impossible before reading the whole thing. Victoria added the rule to her notes. You may be our most demanding advisor. I am in the research department, Emma reminded her. The Tomorrow Workshop Fund launched 6 weeks later without revealing Daniel's identity. The public campaign showed what small amounts could accomplish. $10 for wire and batteries, $25 for microscope repairs, $50 for replacement bicycle tools. Thousands of people who believed their contributions were too small began giving. Hayes Capital matched them. Then 2 of the schools most in need refused to apply. The first grants repaired equipment in 14 schools, including a rural high school where students restored a greenhouse irrigation system. Another grant supplied a library with tools for a weekend repair. Club. Daniel reviewed safety plans after his regular work hours and was paid fairly for the expertise he provided. He placed part of that income in Emma's education account and part in the Tomorrow Fund. Victoria did not object. She had learned that receiving and giving did not need to defeat each other. The launch was not immediately successful. 2 school districts rejected the first application because teachers lacked time to complete the forms. A rural principal explained that the grant required photographs and equipment inventories his small staff could not produce. Daniel argued that a program designed to help under-resourced schools should not demand the most administrative labor from them. Victoria brought the criticism to the foundation board. Compliance staff worried that simpler applications would make oversight difficult. Daniel proposed a 2-stage process. Schools could begin with a 1-page description and a telephone conversation. Only finalists would complete detailed safety and purchasing documents, with foundation staff available to help. The change increased applications from rural and low-income districts. It also revealed needs the original program had overlooked. Several schools owned modern equipment they could not use because one inexpensive component had failed. Others needed secure storage more than new tools. The fund began paying local technicians to evaluate repair before approving replacement. That solution created an unexpected risk. One approved technician submitted nearly identical inspection reports for 4 schools and recommended replacing equipment in every case. Daniel noticed that 2 photographs showed the same damage control board from different angles. He alerted Margaret before approving payment. The foundation paused the 4 grants and hired an independent inspector. 3 pieces of equipment needed minor repairs, not replacement. The technician had also directed purchases toward a supplier owned by his brother. Some board members wanted to remove every repair option and return to buying new equipment from established vendors. Daniel argued that one dishonest contractor did not make repair unsafe. Weak verification. Did. If we respond by buying new every time, he said, schools lose money and useful equipment still becomes waste. Fix the control, not the mission. The foundation required conflict disclosures, rotating inspectors, and a second review for replacement recommendations above a set amount. The dishonest technician was removed, affected schools received corrected plans, and no grant money was lost. Victoria insisted on reporting the incident in the fund's first public review. Communications staff feared donors would interpret the disclosure as failure. The opposite happened. Contributions increased after readers saw that the foundation had found the problem, protected the money, and changed the process. For Daniel, the episode carried a personal consequence. His signature appeared on the original technician list because he had helped establish the qualifications. Although he had not selected the contractor alone, he considered resigning. Margaret refused the gesture. Accountability does not mean leaving before you repair what you helped design. Daniel remained, rewrote the inspection standards, and trained reviewers to look for duplicated evidence. The program emerged slower but stronger. More importantly, students waiting for equipment saw adults admit an error without abandoning the work. At Jefferson Middle School, students wanted to restore a neglected courtyard weather station. Their first plan exceeded the budget and depended on equipment they did not understand. Daniel visited as a technical advisor and resisted the temptation to redesign everything himself. "Tell me what you wanted to measure," he said. The students chose rainfall, temperature, wind direction, and air quality. Daniel helped them separate essential parts from ambitious additions. Emma attended the final Saturday build and discovered that children only a few years older than she was could use drills, sensors, and computer code safely when adults trusted them with clear instruction. The weather station failed during its first rainstorm because water entered a connection box. The students expected Daniel to fix it. He handed them towels and asked where they thought the water had traveled. They found the gap, changed the seal, and tested the system again. "Failure is information," Daniel told them. "It becomes waste only when we refuse to learn from it." Victoria watched from the courtyard. The sentence applied equally to the foundation, her investments, and the years she had spent believing leadership meant having the answer before anyone saw the problem. The fund published both successful projects and lessons from failed attempts, without identifying children who preferred privacy. Donors responded positively to the honesty. Small recurring contributions increased because people could see exactly what $10 or $20 helped accomplish. The program was growing. So was the chance that someone would connect its technical advisor to the anonymous letters. 3 weeks later, an education reporter called Margaret. She had found a public photograph from the foundation's first neighborhood meeting. A younger Daniel and Emily stood near the back. Daniel now appeared in a school newsletter as a technical advisor. The reporter asked whether he was the donor behind Victoria's speeches about small gifts. Margaret gave no answer and informed Victoria. Victoria immediately called Daniel rather than deciding for him. "There is no proof," she said. "We can refuse comment, but the reporter may publish the question." Daniel worried less about recognition than about strangers approaching Emma. He asked the foundation to confirm only that advisors were chosen for relevant experience and that donor identities remained private. Victoria delivered that statement without praising Daniel in a way that would confirm a theory. The reporter published a story about the fund's simplified applications instead. She omitted the speculation because it could not be verified and involved a child. The danger passed, but it changed the program. Staff stopped using Daniel's image in school newsletters, and he reviewed a written privacy plan before visiting future sites. Protecting the secret now required more than good intentions. It required systems strong enough to hold when curiosity arrived. One anonymous envelope continued arriving each month. Margaret recognized the blue handwriting, but treated it like every other gift. The foundation deposited the check, issued no public praise, and allowed the purpose to remain larger than the name. Their friendship moved beyond the fund. They met at Harbor Bean, the repair clinic, and occasionally the science museum. Daniel declined a company retreat that conflicted with Emma's school performance and refused a driver when the bus was sufficient. Victoria first mistook the refusals for discomfort with her wealth. "Friendship does not require me to say yes, so you know I trust you," he said. Sometimes no is only no. She learned to accept the boundary. Daniel learned that receiving could also preserve dignity. When the clinic needed insurance for its youth program, Victoria introduced 3 brokers without selecting one or paying the bill. When Hayes Capital replaced office tools, Daniel arranged for the usable equipment to reach the clinic. Emma's rainwater filter prototype tested their progress by leaking across the kitchen table just as Victoria arrived. "What did we learn?" Victoria asked, helping move the papers. "Never test water beside tax documents," Daniel said. "The seal failed," Emma corrected him. The tax documents were a separate management failure. Emily's photograph remained above them. On the anniversary of her death, Daniel and Emma invited Victoria for Emily's favorite stew. They remembered a woman who lost keys, burned toast, and once painted half her room the wrong color. Victoria spoke about losing her own mother in college and using work to avoid grief. No one tried to replace anyone. Remembering the dead as complete people allowed the living to build trust without treating happiness as betrayal. Several months later, the foundation held its annual scholarship celebration. Daniel declined a place on stage, as Victoria knew he would. He and Emma sat near the back while students described the careers they hoped to pursue. One young woman planned to become a civil engineer and design clean water systems for rural communities. Emma leaned toward her father with wide eyes. "That is what I want to do." "Then listen closely," Daniel whispered. "She knows more than your finance department." At the end of the program, Victoria addressed the audience. She did not mention Daniel. Instead, she held up a copy of the first anonymous note. "This foundation began with large hopes and very little money," she said. "During our hardest years, someone sent small gifts with a sentence reminding us to believe in tomorrow. Those gifts did not build this organization alone. They did something equally important. They arrived at the exact point where one more act of faith could keep a person moving." She explained that generosity should never be judged only by the amount printed on a check. A student might reach college because one person paid an application fee, another repaired a laptop, and someone else offered an hour of tutoring. No single act needed to become the whole solution. "We often celebrate the person who gives the most," Victoria continued. "Tonight, I want to celebrate everyone who gives what they can, does the work in front of them, and leaves enough hope for the next person." Every scholarship folder contained the sentence Daniel and Emily had written for 12 years. Someone believed in tomorrow. "Please help them reach it." Daniel lowered his eyes when he saw the words. Emma slipped her hand into his. "Mom would like this," she whispered. "She would complain that the printing cost too much," Daniel said. Emma tried not to laugh during the speech. After the celebration, they joined Victoria on the building's front steps. The rain had stopped, and the pavement reflected the city lights. For a while, none of them spoke. "Did I keep my promise?" Victoria asked Daniel. "You did. You kept the name out and let the purpose grow." Emma reached in her backpack and gave Victoria a folded drawing. It showed 4 figures beneath a bright sky. Daniel, Emma, and Victoria stood beside a work table covered with tools. Above them, Emily held a small lantern. At the bottom, Emma had written, "Kindness keeps traveling when someone carries the light." Victoria knelt and hugged her. "Your mother raised an extraordinary family." "Daddy helped," Emma said. Daniel looked away with a smile. The next Tuesday, Harbor Bean Cafe was crowded again. Victoria arrived, carrying no assistance folder and wearing the cream coat from the morning they met. Daniel sat beside the window with his notebook open. The household bills were covered. Emma's school needs were listed. A payment from the advisory work had been divided between savings and the Tomorrow Fund. The numbers were modest, careful, and enough. Victoria stopped beside the table. "May I sit here?" Daniel moved his coffee and pulled out the chair. "You no longer need to ask." She sat down as rain traced silver lines across the glass. People around them saw a billionaire and a school maintenance worker sharing coffee, although most did not recognize either one. They could not see the 12 years of letters between them, the students whose next steps had been protected, or the promise a dying woman had asked her husband to keep. They saw only two friends at a small table and an empty chair that had found the right person. Daniel never became famous. His name did not appear on the fund, and no camera arrived at his home. He continued repairing classrooms, making imperfect pancakes, and giving only after his family's needs were secure. Victoria continued building companies, but she began judging success by more than growth. She learned to protect the dignity of people whose stories could easily be used by those with greater power. The anonymous letters stopped after Daniel knew Victoria had found him, but the message did not. It appeared on scholarship folders, repair club walls, and notes attached to donations of every size. Thousands of people carried it into places Daniel would never visit. Sometimes the kindest people are not invisible because the world failed to notice them. They are invisible because they chose purpose over applause. The best way to honor them is not always to reveal their names or repay every dollar. Sometimes it is to respect the gift, protect the person, and help the kindness continue traveling towards someone else's tomorrow.